everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're still reading King of Scars, and it's chapter 11, which is
the Zoya chapter.
So Zoya and the gang are preparing for their grand tour of Ravkan miracles, and this is leaving Zoya a little stressed. She finds herself snapping at everyone more than usual, but she's allowed to. She's the general of the Ravkan second army. She normally snaps at everyone anyways. Though Zoya didn't quite buy the whole,
pre-scarred animal fairy tale Thornwood story,
she still thinks that this trip is going to be really good for Nikolai and the crown. But this leaves Zoya having to acknowledge that she's actually very fearful right now. She's afraid that all of these followers of the Starless One are right, and that the Darkling's coming back. And let's not forget that whenever the beast came out of Nikolai and said her name with the Darkling's voice, that he wanted to kill Zoya. Zoya's ready for him this time. So Zoya isn't going to let herself be governed by this fear. She's going to try and take control, but she still finds herself trying to, not be too close to Nikolai or in the same room alone with him. She almost feels embarrassed that she has to have the twins accompany her every night to chain him up. And she hates this because she knows that the monster would love this. Genya made a new sleeping tonic for Nikolai, and it's a lot stronger than the last one. 1 drop on a good night, 2 on a bad night, and no more than that because it would probably kill him. So Genya, David, and Zoya are all discussing what these new tonics are made out of. And David starts to correct Genya and being like, oh, well, what you're saying isn't quite exactly right that's in there. And Genya just cuts him off. So I'm wondering, what exactly is she trying to hide from Zoya? Is there maybe some parem or some form of parem being used in this, tonic to wake him up in the morning? Or is it something else entirely? Because Genya's the only person that can, relate to Nikolai on all of this. She was affected by the Darkling too. She was attacked by these monsters. And I'm wondering if, at the same time that Nikolai's going through all of this, if Genya has something going on with her too. Is the Darkling coming to her in some way? She even volunteers to go instead of Zoya because she sees that Zoya is struggling, and David's not very happy about that. But, Zoya's a tough girl. She's going to go. Genya even admits she was attacked by these monsters too. She understands the pull of darkness. Yet again, I'm like, is the Darkling trying to pull her in somehow? Is he getting in contact with her? Is something going on that we don't know of yet? Then Tamara comes in and says that she is late because her wife was sulking. And I am so happy that everyone's, getting married.
Except for Zoya and Nikolai, they'll be next.
Tamara and Nadia got married, and I'm just really happy about this. It was a nice little moment amongst all the crap going on. Before everyone's getting ready to leave, Zoya has the urge to hug Genya, and she gives in. She indulges in this human contact.
And she hugs her.
And this freaks everybody out. Toila is just staring in disbelief, and Genya even stiffens up as to probably not ruin this moment until she gives in to Zoya's hug. Genya lets Zoya know that she knows the difference between a good king and a bad king, and to bring Nikolai back in one piece. And Zoya's getting teary-eyed, and it makes me want to get teary-eyed. She just hurries out the door before anyone can even see her cry.
Relatable.
For once, this group is traveling in style and comfort and luxury, and Zoya's very happy about this. And she's happy that they're keeping Yuri in a totally separate coach from them with Toila, and they're going over all of these old religious texts. Yuri's even getting into this whole trip that they're on. He easily gave up his black robes of the Darkling cult for just simple brown ones, so he wouldn't, stand out. Nikolai's just like, oh, for the Darkling to be made a saint, I have to know all about this ritual and the location of the Thornwood and this whole purification thing. And Yuri goes on to tell him, well, purification might not be what you think it is. It's more of a return to a true belief. And I think that this wording's a little interesting, and I'm wondering that if they do end up finding this Thornwood and go along with the ritual, that it's not going to turn out how Nikolai planned. So Zoya asks Nikolai what he's going to do with Yuri after this whole Thornwood incident is all over. She's worried that he could start a holy war between him and the Apparat, and the Apparat would be able to do so under Alina's banner.
Nobody wants that.
But Nikolai thinks he can find a way to compromise. He'll just set him up with all the reading material he wants, let Yuri himself go out and propose this idea to the people, and then just send him off to the Wandering Isle to, preach the gospel of the Darkling, which is Basically exile without calling it exile. And as they're traveling, Zoya remembers that this is the first time that Nikolai's actually traveled the country and toured in a long time, since right after the Civil War. That was back when Zoya didn't really know him or even trust him. He actually surprised Zoya.
Like a man actually surprised Zoya in a good way.
She saw him actually helping people as he went along on his first tour, and this gave her a lot of hope for Ravka's future. Sometimes she still felt that excitement and that hope while she was working with the Second Army and rebuilding it. Other times she just felt like a child masquerading as this great leader because she didn't quite have the control she wanted. It was such an exciting time being on the verge of something new. She said that unifying Ravka was the easy part, but dragging this country into the future is what's proving to be most difficult. Basically, Nikolai was moving too far, too fast. His ideas were too progressive, and a resistance rose up in response to all of this. They were hoping that in addition to everything else, that this trip would help with that too. Every day, Nikolai would spend the time trying to win over the townspeople, and then every night he'd go back and try to win over all of the nobility. They had all of these grand dinners and spent all of this time having these long talks about Ravka's future. Sometimes Nikolai would even ask Zoya to join him in on these dinners, which she did not like at all and was like, this is just another reason why he needs a queen with him. After Zoya gets to witness Nikolai winning over the nobility, she asks him how she does it every single night. He changes their minds and then has them thanking him for that experience. He tells her that he just has to play into what he knows they want to hear. He tells the nobility one thing, but that will lead to the serfs actually benefiting in the end from what he tells them. He lets Zoya know that progress is a river, that once it leaps its banks, it can't be taken back. So once the people start going along with these progressive ideas and taking them on as their own and forming their own ideas about what to do, there's no stopping them. But what Zoya really means by this question is, how do you do it? How do you spend days on the road? You're drugged up every night, woken up every morning by this crazy strong tonic, and then you're still performing all of your kingly duties the next day. But Nikolai lets her know it's just part of the job. People of Ravka put their lives in his hands, and he has to take this job seriously. This new sleeping tonic really freaks Zoya out that he has to use, and Nikolai even says it feels less like, being put to sleep and more like being punched in the jaw, which I'm still wondering what exactly they put in it that they're not telling them about. He didn't even look like he was just going to sleep. He would take the sleeping tonic and look dead. Zoya would be so freaked out about this, she would have to check him and make sure he was still alive. And it just looked like she was watching him die every night. She keeps asking Nikolai, how do you do this? I don't understand how you put on this grand performance every night and change into these different people. But Nikolai tells Zoya that it's not very different from the performance that she puts on at the Little Palace. He knows she's not as clever and as strong all the time as she puts on. Zoya's like,
maybe.
But the way you change is like light over water. These performances and the people buying into it only seem to kind of feed him. He says the real secret behind all of this is that he just can't stand to be alone. But then he says that there are some places that no one can go with him, and then he just takes a swig of the tonic and passes out. The next day, Zoya's still watching Nikolai and realizing how is still putting on this show for the people. He's, making sure that he's wearing the actual uniform of the First Army, and he's showing all of the medals that he earned, that they aren't just for show like the rest of his family. He's winning over every single town and village that they go through. She watches his demeanor change, watches the way that he rides a horse change. He's just putting on whatever mask that he can see that these people need. And the group is still riding really hard. They are only planning for this whole trip to take about 3 weeks. They're only spending a day and a night in each town, and then they're on to the next. As the group is reaching their destinations of all of these miracle religious landmarks, Nikolai is still being what the people need him to be. In the town where there was a great earthquake, Nikolai's taking off his shirt and standing right next to all the people moving rubble.
Zoya really likes that, I'm sure.
Where the hummingbirds spewed from the earth, he's vowing to build a new church there. And it's like,
how are we gonna get this money at this point?
It's just a guessing game. Nikolai's like, yeah, maybe it'll come from the church, from my new bride, from whatever ally we're gonna get. Maybe even the apparat will sell off some altarpiece for money. This is making Zoya kind kind of get why Nikolai gave into the apparat so easily and why he said he would put up churches. Because it's not the apparat that the people are going to be thinking of whenever they go into these places, whenever they see these places, when they hear the church bells ring. They're going to think of the day that Nikolai came into town, told them he would build these churches. Remember the day that he came in and helped move the rubble, made all of these promises to make their lives better. They're not going to be thinking of men like the apparat. It's going to be Nikolai on their minds. And that special day the king of Ravka came to their village. The places that they're going to remind Zoya of where she grew up as a child. Everyone's hopeless and hungry and desperate. The kind of place and situations that make people do awful things, like her mom selling her off to be a child bride at the age of 9. She tells Nikolai it is always the girls who suffer first, and that's why she's pushing for these factories to be built, because it doesn't take hard labor to end up like pushing a button or doing the work that a factory requires. Nikolai's surprised by the sympathy she's having for the people, and she's thinking, I was common once. Liliana and Lada were common once.
I'm still not too sure who they are.
And then she just kind of covers up all of these emotions that are being brought up by saying, we just have to do this so Ravka can survive, so the Grisha can be stronger. She's still thinking back to the town she grew up in, and she lets Nikolai know that the draft was what changed people's lives whenever it came. Because they actually took women into the army. Remember, Alina was in the army with Mal. She was like a map maker. But it gave women and girls a chance to do something other than just die in childbirth in these little dingy towns. Zoya also tells Nikolai that she always had the makings of a great general. When she was younger, before her powers came out, she wanted to be a soldier. But her mother only saw her beautiful face and thought that that's all she was worth. And if it wasn't for Liliana, she said that she would have been sold off like a calf. Zoya wonders, could she really blame her mother? She was desperate, she was starving, she was just miserable and in this horrible situation, constantly weary and hopeless. Even after all these years, Zoya does not have an ounce of forgiveness for her mother, and I don't blame her. So after all of these
emotions are coming up,
they get to the next town and have to sit through a horrible children's choir. And if you've ever had to go to any type of children's performance where they sing or play instruments, you know what they're talking about. And after this
lovely performance,
they ride off with the governor to look at the holy site. It's actually this large piece of forest that all fell over in the same direction overnight, and it's pointing right in the direction of the fold.
Which is pretty creepy.
And Zoya brings up her concerns to Nikolai that Yuri and the apparat really aren't enemies at all, that they're just working to get Nikolai to places like this out of the palace where he's vulnerable. But Nikolai thinks that these grand displays are way too out of the apparat's reach. He starts to believe that something bigger than all of them is going on. But Zoya still doesn't trust either of them. And I don't really either. Nikolai says that the apparat is a man of ambition, so he can kind of be managed. But Yuri is a true believer, or he's the greatest actor ever. And he's sure that it's more so on the true believer side because Nikolai has to be the greatest actor ever because he just smiled through that children's choir. And the group is getting closer to the fold, and Zoya is grateful that they're actually at their last stop before they get there. Soon they would either have the answers that they wanted or they would just be on their way home. She's ready to be free of all of this anticipation of getting there. What's surprising is at this site, the villagers actually don't follow them out there. It's just the local priest that escorts them out. And he tells them that villagers are not allowed at the site after a certain time, and that the pilgrims are to actually be kept in the village. And they have to be under supervision to even visit the site. The priest is a lot different from a lot of the people that we're seeing on the religious side of things in Ravka. He said that this place isn't a place to be picked apart for souvenirs. He wants to preserve the saint's extraordinary work. When they get there, Zoya gets chills and she notices that something is very different here. They don't even hear birds singing, and even the twins can feel this shift, and they kind of look at Zoya and they're like, okay, yeah, something is weird here. We need to be on alert. So the statue of Sancta Elisabetta is at the entrance of the cathedral, and all of these red roses are cracking through her statue. They just kind of tumble out wildly around the statue, and it looks like they form a pool of blood at her feet. Yuri is pumped. He is loving this moment.
Loving this miracle.
He's just crying, and Zoya's like,
Shut up or I'm gonna stuff you back in the coach myself.
Toilet realizes that the tears that are falling down the statue's face are hard like obsidian, and that instantly made me think, oh my gosh, Zoya made the observation that Nikolai's teeth in beast form were like shiny obsidian.
So are they connected?
From where they are at the cathedral, it's actually placed on this really high hill, and you can actually see the town right outside the fold from here, and then see the fold sprawling off into the distance. It's just this glimmer of white dead sand. After noticing this, Zoya hears Nikolai like make this sound, and she sees him trying to tug on his gloves, but not before Zoya could see like dark veins pulsing. Zoya thinks, oh, we're so close to the fold, it's almost as if the monster inside of Nikolai is recognizing this place. And she so badly wants to draw away from him in fear, but she's standing her ground. Even though this is happening to Nikolai right now, he asks, what exactly is the saint's story? And you know, Yuri's like,
oh, just both beautiful and tragic.
Just picture him standing there all weird. So when she was 18, all of these raiders were pillaging and just destroying all of these nearby towns. And when they came to her town, she was the only one who stood up to them. She met these soldiers face to face in a field of white roses, fell to her knees and begged the saints for help. And the response she got was this swarm of bees. It rose from the blossoms and attacked the soldiers in a swarm. So her town was saved.
But
then all of these other towns and villages were coming to her and saying, you need to save our town too. They demanded that she repeat this miracle, and she just couldn't. So, you know, true Ravka fashion, what do they do to someone they think is a saint who isn't making them happy? They murder them. They have her drawn and quartered, which is awful to even think about. And then they said that whenever she died, that the white roses in the field turned blood red. Zoya takes a rose and she snaps it in her fingers, and the priest and they're like, this whole place is just really setting Zoya on edge. Zoya's trying to make this point, you know, this is a woman who's supposed to be answering people's prayers. She saved her village and, you know, they had her killed for it. And Yuri counters by saying, oh, you know, martyrs show the willingness of their sacrifice. It's the whole point. And then Zoya's like, do you really think Lizabeta wanted to be drawn and quartered? Or how about the other saint when he was stoned to death? Or chained up and thrown in a river to drown? Like, do you think any of these people really wanted to do that? But before Zoya can even probably really nicely let Yuri know what she would do in Lizabeta's place, something huge just bursts through the cathedral, bursts through the statue, grabs Zoya,
and just swoops her up into the air. What just happened?
I am reading the end of this chapter, I'm assuming that with all of this weird fold stuff going on and Nikolai's beast like being triggered to come out, that it's like some creepy monster coming to get Zoya.
Some creepy darkling monster.
And I'm left with many questions. There is just so much talk in this book especially about how saints are Grisha. And I feel like the other books have really been building up that point too. And did Alina get off easy with this whole martyr thing? Like, she faked her death. Like, if she wouldn't have faked her death, the apparat probably would have had her like murdered in some horrible way to truly be martyred. And I'm wondering if she's gonna come back. Like, I really want to see her, but at the same time, if she comes back and somebody realizes she's her and that she's not dead, I don't even know what would happen. And this book especially, I feel like, is really hitting hard on all of the religious stuff going on in Ravka. And it's kind of building up the lore of the country too. So I'm wondering where this is all going to lead. And I'm really worried about Zoya. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Chapter by Chapter, King of Scars.
But I'm really panicking right now.
Please like, subscribe, comment down below.
I'm still panicking.
See you guys next time.